Hi, good day to all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Ramcharan is with me on the panel. And if at any point in time in between, if any of you would like to ask questions and you feel that it would help if you are up there in the panel with us, that would be, we can do that. That's not a problem. You know, we've had this topic, for whatever better word, called the Eastern spirituality approaches in coaching. I don't know what else, what other words we have used so far. And we have covered quite a bit of ground on this over the period of the last about, I think, 6 sessions or 4 sessions, I'm not quite sure, almost about 4 to 5 months. Primarily about the parallelity as well as the congruence in some cases with the Western philosophical approaches, psychological approaches, even scientific approaches, quantum mechanics and stuff, neurobiological approaches, with the Eastern philosophical and spiritual approaches. We had talked about specifically the 4 states of awareness, and we had also talked about the use of self and other ways of approaching and creating the state of awareness. In any of these, to be very honest, I'm not saying it with any sense of wanting to prove being present or whatever, but I don't honestly even remember most of the time what we talked about. Okay, this is all being recorded. If you want to listen to it, all of it is available on the website. If you can't access them, you can always ask Magda. And at any point in time, I'm completely available to answer any queries, because many of these subjects that we talked about are extremely subtle in some ways, deep, and perhaps to those who are not that familiar with the multiple approaches to these, a bit complex as well. So I'm very open, and we can continue this along with other stuff, and we can keep answering these questions. But in the next couple of sessions, maybe 3 sessions, I would like to sort of put together something which would enable a better understanding of what we are trying to do at Kocharya to integrate the wisdom of the East with what I would call the knowledge of the West. Both are extremely important. It's all very well to pretend that we are wise. You cannot sit and reflect and meditate without doing anything. You need to act, you need to do something, you need to have the knowledge, the skills to be able to do something. But at the same time, there has to be a sense of discrimination, there has to be a sense of awareness, there has to be a sense of that experiential wisdom which takes us beyond the pure mind-body space into something which is more, which, for a want of a better word, let me call that as energy. For those of you who might be familiar with some of these Sanskrit words, I really don't want to load many of you who may not be familiar with that. There's a concept of what is called the koshas in Sanskrit, which are called the layers around the body. At the lowest level, the first kosha is what is called Annamaya kosha, which is basically the physical sensory body, which is fed by whatever we eat, etc. Anna means food in Sanskrit. That's a gross body. And that is what is the first level of awareness, mindfulness. If we pay heed to what is really happening within our mind and body, that's a state of awareness that we are in. It's a very essential state. I do not want to say anything negative about mindfulness. It's fantastic. It's certainly the first level of awareness where it's far, far superior to a lack of awareness. The second kosha is called the pranamaya kosha, which is a kind of an energy level, which is about the breath. Prana is the breath, and there are 5 different pranas in the body. And it is something akin to the dream state in a way. And then there is something called the Manonmaya kosha, and after that is called the Vijnanamaya kosha. these two, in a sense, are between the dream and the deep sleep state. The Manomaya Kosha is a combination of the cognitive as well as the emotional state. It's not quite the energy state, but close to the energy state. And the Vijnanamaya Kosha is more on the energy scale, more towards an energy state. And the final state, what is called the Anandamaya Kosha, is really the final state of the fourth state of awareness. I don't want to get into the details of it. There is another concept of 7 shariras, which are available, 7 bodies that exist, which are parallel to these koshas. But the word Vijnana, I just want to explain to you, whether you are from the West or from the East. The word Jnana means knowledge. The word Vijnana, in Sanskrit, the word V is added to something which is beyond knowledge. And to some extent, I would like to understand this of that state of wisdom, experiential wisdom. And when you go into reflection using that experiential wisdom, the state of awareness can lead you into the fourth state, will lead you into the fourth state if you do it properly. So when we talk about between knowledge and wisdom, it's always an interplay between the Manomaya Kosha and the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is about knowledge aiding wisdom and the wisdom aiding knowledge. One without the other is useless. You need both. It is similar to being active and being passive, the yin and the yang. They come together, Shiva and Shakti. That is where the interplay happens. That is where really the greatest good happens, in a way. So I'll just leave it at that. If there are any questions any of you have on that, it's a rather involved topic. It is something, again, there is a lot of experiential inputs which are required to be able to fully understand what it's all about. I'm not even within touching distance of that, to be honest. All that I can talk about a little bit from my own experience, which is limited. Now, I just want to go into a little more detail about this retreat that we are planning in Tiruvannamalai. It's not a sales pitch, but I just want to explain to you what we are planning to do. And as much of it as can be conveyed in a virtual sessions like these, we would be quite happy. And probably this is planned to be towards the last week of February. So after that, it may be quite possible for some of those who have practiced, who have been with us, with Ramcharan and I in that retreat, they would be able to share their experience and talk a little more about it as well. And that could be interesting in terms of pure wisdom creation and awareness creation. First of all, the location for this was chosen after Ramcharan and I discussed in a place called Tiruvannamalai, which is roughly about 5 hours journey from Bangalore, 5 hours from Chennai, probably less. It's a home of one of the greatest saints who lived in India not so long ago. He died in 1952, Ramana, and you can Google his name, R-A-M-A-N-A, Maharishi. He went there at the age of about 16, and he stayed there till his death sometime, probably in his 70s. And his process of self-inquiry is one of the deepest, the most powerful awareness-inducing processes that I have personally come across. It's not about faith. It's not about just emotions. It's not about devotion. It's about extremely powerful internal reflection, and which is why for coaches, it is something which can be extremely relevant. We are not talking about blind faith here. Just because something is written, I believe that the 10 Commandments or whatever may be some scriptural truth in any religion and so on and so forth. Ramana went through what was called an experience of death at the age of 16. He brought it upon himself deliberately in a way. And at the end of which he realized that there was something far beyond the mind and the body. And that is something each one of us can really experience. That a state in which you do feel that you are energy, at least you touch the glimpse of it. And that stays with you always. Once you have reached that space, you will never forget that space. Ramana chose this place called Tiruvannamalai, difficult to pronounce. It just means the holy place that cannot be reached, as it were. It has a hill, not a big one, more of a hillock than a real mountain, which, according to geological estimates, is about as old as the Earth itself. It's one of the oldest geological formations in the world. And Ramana believed that this was one of the oldest and the abode of the gods, as it were, and also the center of the universe. And many of us who have been there, Ramcharan has been there, I've been there, there are many of you who might have been there yourself. And you would have felt that energy, especially if you had gone into the place where the mortal remains of Ramana were buried, the Samadhi. And sitting there itself is an experience. The first time I went and sat down there, I couldn't move for a few hours. It was that powerful for me. Different people have had different experiences. There are only two experiences that I recommend to people who have a spiritual bent and who might want to create better awareness in themselves, internally reflect. Doesn't mean they have to become renunciates, etc. They can be much more powerful in what they do by going through these experiences. One of them is Vipassana, the 10-day meditation, the Buddhist form of meditation, which has its basis in yoga and tantra. And the other one is visiting Tiruvannamalai. So that's the reason we chose this. It's a tremendously powerful energy center. And this is a kind of ideal location to work through a process like what we plan to do there. And what is the objective of this process? Yes, we have sent out a mailer, we have explained something, we will send you a much more detailed one once you register. I'm even rewriting an ebook, which I hope would become a supporting document for those of you who are planning to come for this. In my experience, over a period of time, I found both in my own case as well as in others, that when we are young or even middle-aged, wherever we are, our focus is purely on two things. It is gaining power and wealth. There may be a few who are different, but by and large, the majority of people, 80% of the people that I meet, and I've coached several hundreds of people. And this is something that John Whitmore said. He said, I have worked with thousands of people as a coach, and I have found invariably everybody starts with material goals. And these material goals are usually about power and wealth. They are very, very short-term goals. And so when I started asking people, what is it that you really would like to see beyond this? Where would you like to see it? Because executives usually would tell me that, look, in the next 3 years, I want to be in this position, higher level, I want to be in the corner office, I want to make whatever, hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million or whatever it is. When I was 35, the only goal that I had was that I occupied a corner seat in a very well-known multinational company in India, and that I would be a dollar millionaire. At a time in India, my salary was something like $500 because the government had legislated that even the chairman of the company can only be paid about $600 a month, less than probably a blue-collar worker in any other part of the world. But the dream was that this is what I would be. And I worked on a process similar to what I'm going to describe to you, and whatever I wish for happen. But when I work with people and I ask them, why are you focusing on this? And the point is that later years, it didn't do me any good. I found that short-term focus on money and power really was very, very transient. At a point in time, they exploded, imploded, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to get off, and it took me some time. So rather than go through the trauma, if one can prepare oneself for the transience of this, the impermanence of this, and can be aspire to something, I'm not saying that you shouldn't aspire to the corner office and the $1 million, but along with that, is there something much more permanent and which is much larger than those? Is it something that you can leave as a legacy to other people? Can you be a role model? So when I ask people about that, they say, what are you talking about? I can't even think beyond the next 2 years or 3 years. I asked why. Oh, first it is, I can't control it. So we got into a discussion of what is it that you can control? Can you even control whether you would live tomorrow? Is there any guarantee, 100% guarantee, ironclad guarantee that you would live tomorrow? Strictly speaking, no. Who else can you control? Most often we are not able to control ourselves. We don't control our children. We don't control our spouses. So who are you trying to control here? Your future, which you don't even know what's going to happen. So that led to the second aspect of it. Oh, we are very uncertain about the future. It becomes very fuzzy. Then finally, as I drilled deeper and deeper, as probably John Whitmore said, they said, we are afraid to look beyond that. We don't know what there is going to be. So we started working on it together. I stood by their side, as it were. And I do it with every single person I coach now. And then made them look 20, 25 years beyond where they are. And I have worked with my children on this, which is pretty much what is not recommended for coaches, but it certainly worked. And I just asked them this: look beyond the power and wealth. Look at other things that would make a difference to you. For instance, health. If you had all the power and wealth, and if you're not healthy, then something is going to happen to you. Would it make any sense to you? It's not. Relationship. If you were to lose all those who you really love, would it help at all? No. Are there other things? Most people come to the point of service. Can I serve somebody else? Can I serve other people in the world who are not as privileged as I am? It automatically happens as you move into these larger visualizations of what would fulfill you. Learning, perhaps. There are multiple things like that. We normally work on 8 things: power, wealth, which anyway you would, relationships, health, service to other people, learning, things that you would really enjoy. And finally, maybe something larger, the environment, perhaps. It could be spirituality, whatever it may be. Say about 8 things. And I would ask them to look at each one of those and what do you think that you would like to be 20, 25 years from now? In Kocharya, we call it a wheel of life, creating one as a hero's journey that you would like to go to. Pretty much everybody who goes through the PCC program, if the trainers are going through the recommended format, they should be taking you through this. And once you get an overall picture of these, with a combination of these 8 attributes of what you would like to, you get a vision, a holistic vision of what you might wish to be, the legacy that you want to create when you are 20, 25 years from where you are today. If you're in your 40s, maybe in your 60s, if you're 50, in 70s, whatever. And then from there, you can come back every 5 years to closer to where you are the next 2, 3 years, 5 years. What is it that you need to be in order to reach that vision at the end of 25 years? And that becomes your shorter term goal and an intent. And on that intent, you can start working with a very powerful meditative process to be able to achieve whatever that you want to do. That's one part of it. The problem with that is that even without guidance, without taking you through certain exercises, to be able to do what I'm suggesting that you would do, which makes a lot of sense, is going to be difficult because we are conditioned in many things based on experience, based on our growing up, based on what we see outside. We are often confused between what we really need and what we want. These are something very, very different. In fact, it was Ramana who said, this universe is capable of fulfilling the needs of even more billions of people than it has today. However, it cannot fulfill the greedy want of even one person. And that's absolutely true. Why we have the problems that we have is not because the natural resources are not available to fulfill the needs of people, but because of the greed of a few, probably 1% of the population or 5% of the population, which makes others suffer by reducing what is available to them below the needs that they have to have if they were to even survive. Now, that mentality is so embedded in us from childhood. We don't think about what we need. We only think about what we want. When you're a child, what is it the other child has in terms of a toy or whatever else it may be? As you grow up, whatever the other person has in terms of a boyfriend, girlfriend, or later in terms of a job, it's everything about my comparing myself to somebody else and I want to be there. And it's nothing to do with my inherent needs, which will satisfy me, something that will fulfill me. And when you run on this want, at some point in time, you snap. And I come across more and more people today, far more than probably a couple of decades ago. Young people who have achieved things far more than ever expected. I worked with guys who started hedge funds, bankers, technologists, startup founders who made it big, huge amounts of money, and they're not satisfied. That's not what they want to be. That's not what they want to do. There's something, a deep sense of dissatisfaction that affects them. However, they do not know what they want. That's a huge problem. And for want of a better word, I call it the confused generation. It doesn't necessarily mean that certain age group or whatever. It is just that more and more there seems to be the creation of these people who have achieved a lot, which for me occurred at the age of 50, today is happening probably at the age of 25 and 30. And it's a disaster. It's because there is so much potential that these people have. And they have done a lot, they have achieved a lot. And the sense of confusion, in the sense of uncertainty, what happens is depression and many other negative stuff. So one of the things that I tried to do with them was to really try to find a meaning for them, a purpose for their lives. What is it that you want? And when I tried it through cognitive means, traditional coaching means, there was only that much that we could go with. Yeah, in coaching we talk, not glibly, we believe in it, but there are limiting beliefs. But the limiting beliefs, even with psychotherapy and so on, and certainly not with coaching, are difficult to fully figure out. Those limiting beliefs very often are deeply dormant, deeply unconscious, and it requires much more effort than a few sessions of coaching. And I have worked with people who have gone through 10 years, 15 years of psychotherapy and still suffering from the same problem that is. And it's become an addiction that going to a psychotherapist every month is a ritual, just like many people go to a church or a shrine, and that's what seems to be. And because you get so used to it and that becomes a zone of comfort, you don't even want to lose it. Some of you may have different experiences, but I've met many people who have had this kind of an experience. So one of the things that I had discovered when I went through a monastic journey at a point in time, studying various techniques, esoteric techniques of meditation, tantra, yoga, and so on, is the process of working with such deep-rooted traumatic beliefs, what you might call similar to the PTSDs, post-trauma stress disorder kind of syndromes, very, very deep. The more powerful, more negative, more disturbing they are, the deeper they are buried in people and more difficult to dislodge. And yet there is a process, and the process is a process of working through them, through the energization of the chakras. The chakra energization is a key part of the process that I work with. And I'm not working this as a coach. Let me be very, very clear. That is why I do not do it as a part of the coaching process. But it's also an awareness creation process. To that extent, it's a coaching process. So there's a borderline somewhere to the extent that individual will want to go deep into it. It's mostly self-reflection with some guidance in terms of how you go in it. It's not going to be any kind of, let's say, externally pushed therapy into you. In the chakra system, the tantric chakra system, which is unfortunately tremendously misunderstood, tremendously misused, there are 7 centers of energy in the body which connect us with the universal energy, so to speak. And those 7 centers start from the perineum point, which is the bottom of the spine, through a point somewhere near our spleen, to a point in the navel, to a point in the heart, a point in the throat, a point in the center of our eyebrows, the third eye, and finally the top of the head, which is called the crown center. And the belief in the chakra system is that the internal energy that we have, which is a holographic image of the universal energy, is stored in the perineum point called the Muladhara, or the root chakra, root center, energy center. Metaphorically, it's supposed to be in the form of 3.5 coiled serpent. There are tremendously powerful, subtler meanings to that. And it is a sleeping serpent, de-energized, not fully creative, till through meditation you can awaken that, and it moves through a subtle nervous system which is supposed to be within the spine called the Sushumna, which crosses through these other chakras and finally reaches the top of the head. And again, there metaphorically, this is supposed to be the union between the male and the female, the passive and the active, the creative and the routine in a way, between Shiva and Shakti. And strangely here, the Shakti, which is the feminine, what you might call the yin in the Taoist term, and Shiva, who is the masculine, the yang, are not in the tradition of how we understand. Because here, the Shakti is the far more powerful. She's the active, she's a creator, she's a kinetic energy. She makes things move. She's the one who is the running engine of this universe. Shiva, equally powerful, I wouldn't say more powerful, equally powerful, but he's passive. He's a potential energy. It's like the pendulum swinging. If you see that it goes to the extreme ends, that is the highest potential energy, almost stopping and staying there. And then as it comes down in the center of its fastest movement, the highest velocity as it were. And that is the height of the kinetic energy, which is what Shakti is. There are multiple processes as to how these chakras can be energized. Many of them extremely dangerous. I have experimented with them. I'm fortunate that nothing irreversible happened to me. Perhaps something did happen to me, I'm not quite sure, but at least not in such a extreme way that you could make out. For instance, I have met people who have gone through these experiences who have gone really mad. They become zombies. And there are recorded instances of these. So it's like Somerset Maugham, he picked up this particular term from one of our Upanishads, the razor's edge. It truly is a razor's edge. You walk the razor's edge. But fortunately, some of these processes have been attenuated and they can be practiced safely. And one of the ways of doing that is to work with them to work through our emotional memories. I'm very cognizant of the fact I'm taking too much time. I'm explaining this to you. I'll stop after a few minutes to get you to ask questions or Ramcharan to elaborate on some of this. One way that the conditioning and the experiences that we have influences is because our memories are usually stored in our mind space, which is not necessarily the brain, but the mind space is the cellular intelligence, which is in every part of our body. Typically, each one of us has got probably several trillion cells. And this intelligence permeates through all these cells. And today, it is a proven neurobiological fact. It's not fluff. And in this mind intelligence, these memories are stored as possibly visual images. In a cyber analogy, I would equate them with video files, which are much larger, multiple times of terabytes. And just like in a computer, what happens is if you load your computer, however powerful it is, with multiple such terabyte files, the computer hangs. The same way, when you have so many powerful emotional memories, which are traumatic, the more trauma, the more emotional it is. And these are stored within you at a point in time, you just hang, you're confused. You're like deer blinded by the headlights of a car, as it were. I know that it's a far-fetched analogy, but believe you me, I found this to be very, very close to the truth with many people. So one of the techniques that can be used for chakra energization is to work through these memories by reliving those memories under controlled conditions through meditative state to relieve them. So in a sense, the emotion-laden part of those memories dissipates, and those terabyte memories become probably text files of kilobytes, as it were. So you create this huge empty mind space within yourself. Try to visualize this. It's not easy, but there are many powerful processes which have been built around this in the Western world as well. But in terms of how to reach that is not that definitely established. The NLP has got timeline therapy. There are certain Jungian therapies, psychodynamic therapies, but none of them, I've learned many of them, including hypnotic stuff or all that kind of a stuff. But they are not even a fraction as powerful as the chakra energization process, which would allow us to go into each of these chakras, which represent certain emotions. For example, simply put, the root chakra is the root of all desires. It connects us to the earth. The spleen chakra, called the Swadhisthana, is an element of water, which is about fear. It's just floating forever, uncertainty. And then the navel chakra is of fire. It's about stress. It's about extreme, let's say, fire in the belly, as it were. But it also equal, the mirror image of that would be an ulcer, tremendous anxiety. So each of these chakras relates to a particular emotion. And we work on them, meditate on them, and bring up those memories which are buried within us, and they actually start emerging by themselves. I don't know how many of you have experienced it, but I certainly did, and many people I have talked to have. When you start meditating, the first thing that happens is about memories which you do not want to think about. Mostly they are about sex, violence, things that make you feel guilty, about shame, and so on and so forth. If anybody says that they haven't experienced this, that means they haven't really meditated. And that is what the meditative process is, because it dredges up those negativities and brings them up. And this is a controlled way of doing when you do the chakra energization process. Unfortunately, that's not a process that you can help other people with on a virtual space like this. If I work with somebody, I have to be there present. I need to see what that person is going through. Secondly, it is also far more powerful as a group. Typically, in my experience, I have found 12 is an extremely powerful group. We can go up to 20, but something between 10 and 20. So that's the kind of size of group that I'm really looking for to put this program together. And once we have created this white space by dissipating, dissolving the emotional memories, by reliving and relieving them, then we embed the intent that we have created through this holistic process that I talked about before. And that intent, what in Sanskrit is called the sankalpa, is something that we then work with through a meditative visualization process, which is through your yogic process called Yoga Nidra, which is a mix between the Tantra and the Yoga, which is a state of mindlessness that I keep talking about. In that state, you actually visualize this intent as something which is realized extremely powerfully. And that's something I have never found to fail, to be honest. I've worked with not merely hundreds, probably thousands of people, and it works. It works to the extent of, to some extent, the selflessness of one's own desires. It doesn't have to be completely be selfless. It's always good to have something that your own internal love for yourself is built into that. So, but it has to be also selfless, looking from the me to the we. And if you create that kind of an intent where you can do good to yourself, but at the same time also do good to other people, and certainly no harm, it is something which always happens. I have multiple experiences to prove that, and many of you may have had yourself, and this is something which is very well demonstrated. So I'll stop at this point. This is broadly the process that we plan to go through. And I'm quite happy to, over a period of time in several sessions for those who are interested, to go through those parts of it which I can safely disseminate. That's not a problem at all, because I don't believe that there should be any fee charged for knowledge, which is not even mine, which I have learned from the wisdom of the ancients and the scriptures. But then when it has to be in the sense of the kind of chakra energization and meditation that I'm talking about, which are safe only when they are worked on a one-to-one basis or one-to-many in a small group basis. It is not something that can be transmitted the way that I'm trying to do with you now. But I'll just leave it here. I don't want to get into that too deeply at this point in time. But some of the stuff that I have talked to you at this point in time, if you have any questions, let me, Deepika, will you be able to share what you're sharing? Deepika, I don't quite understand. That is what I have shared. But if you're asking me, am I able to help you go through this process? Some of it, yes, which I certainly will share in terms of, let's say, creating that wheel of life and creating a short-term intent, etc., can be done. But the process of getting rid of your internal traumas and then embedding a future into it, that's not something that I'm comfortable doing on a virtual basis without working with the individuals. Yeah, when will you be sharing? This retreat in Tiruvannamalai is being planned for the last week of February. We are probably sending out the mailers as we speak. Magda probably has sent out one already. We will be sending out a few. We are looking for at least about a dozen people to come together only when it is worth it to do that. The fees and everything are being put there, and we are trying to make it as reasonable as possible. It's going to be a 3 nights and 4 days in Tiruvannamalai. Ramcharan and I are doing it together. And yes, it's going to be completely experiential. It's more in the line of what I have so far spoken. Yeah. At this point, if any of you have any specific questions on what I have talked about, that's one part of it. I'll wait for you to answer. Meantime, Ramcharan, would you like to add to whatever I have said and your perspective, which may be perhaps slightly different because also of our cultural differences?
Yeah, thanks, Ram. And thanks for the opportunity to do this. I'm very excited and eager to do this retreat. You covered so much ground that it's a little hard for me to kind of narrow it down what I'd like to respond to, but it resonates very deeply. Again, I think actually the reason I chose the Co-Acharya training was in part because you told me that you'd had an experience with Ramana Maharshi, who is my kind of main spiritual influence. And the place Tiruvannamalai, as you mentioned, it has a palpable silence. You know, even if you have no belief or experience in these things, it's an incredible environment in which to be bringing this crucible of change and deepening for people. I think I just, kind of want to reflect on and expand on a couple of points you made. One is that, as people, many people have external markers of success, and as they reach them, find they're still not satisfied. That's kind of one of the eternal truths that, philosophers and mystics and spiritual people throughout time have recognized, that it's not so much, if you just have external markers of success in your life and you don't know yourself, you're never going to be satisfied. So for me, the quest for self-knowledge has been very important since a young age. I'd say, unlike you, at age 35, all I wanted to do was sit by a realized being, if I could. And it's just more recently that I move into a more kind of transactional business career space with that. But when I work with people who have not come into a deep space of self-understanding and haven't worked through some of this stuff, I find you can't really progress deeply in life without addressing the questions of who am I, what is my nature, what is my really depth motivation. And when I find that what everybody's really looking for in its core, they're helplessly seeking the satisfaction that comes from self-knowledge, whether they know it or not. So that's my kind of core orientation to this. Again, there are many things you spoke about, and these topics of spiritual psychology, somatic psychology, all that, you can do PhDs on this, so it's a huge field. I'll just say that, I'll be bringing my background in somatic work into this very strongly. When you mentioned trauma, I'd say that is spot on, that the layers of trauma from, you can even say soul imprints, how that is brought into the body, what's happened through this lifetime, birth trauma, all that's stored in the body and mind. And in going deeper, one has to come to face these traumas, and to do that in a way that's safe and so that they can be easily resolved and the energy of that trauma gets integrated is subtle work. I agree there's only so much that can be done virtually, and the opportunity to work with a group of people in an intensive retreat format is, I think, it should be quite helpful for that. And the piece I bring is a somatic piece. There are many, many techniques for that, bringing in more somatic awareness and familiarizing oneself with one's body experience, felt sense experience, as a kind of a grounding or a way to measure one's state of being. As one comes into more familiarity with that, it becomes easier to resolve and integrate traumas. It frees up a lot of energy, a lot of sensitivity in the body-mind. And we notice that the body is a much more subtle and complex, actually spiritual tool than most people realize. So that's just a brief response. I'll be doing the pieces on somatics and ontology that you suggested. I'll be doing the presentations on that, but overall, I'll be backing you up in the process. And I'm quite curious myself to go through your process because I haven't done it. So yeah, that's it. Kind of some of my basic thoughts about it.
Sure.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramcharan. Nita, you asked, do I need to be a seasoned meditator to be able to do this? In fact, the less you know about meditation, the less you know about yoga, the less you know about Tantra, probably you are better off because you've got that much less to unlearn in these processes. Because very often, what is today taught as yoga and meditation is really far from what the Yoga Sutras say. Again, don't get me onto it. So I'll probably go into a completely different space on that. But one of the things I want to say here is, and I really would like more questions on this, whatever you are saying. To answer Deepika's earlier question, actually, over the next couple of months, and I would like to embed the learning that we have from this retreat from other people as well to create a final e-book, which I'm quite happy to put this out for free or at a very, very marginal cost on the website as an e-book. The only problem with that is my own experience makes me be very cautious about what is being put out, because several years ago, probably 30 years ago, I read about chakra energization. I'd done a lot of work. I read about it with Indian mystics. And there was this book from a Californian who wrote about how to activate the chakras. And it wasn't fluff, it was genuine. But the danger with that is when I practiced that, which was ritualistic practice, I could have died, or far worse, I could have become a zombie. It is as powerful as that, as dangerous as that. In between, I had some extraordinarily powerful experiences. I once, during that process, when I was going through about 4 or 5 months, I walked out somewhere and near my office, I was at that time in Indonesia, and there was a fountain. And as I was looking at the fountain, suddenly each of those water droplets, and I believe you me, that really happened. They sort of froze, and there was something unbelievable that was happening to me. Within that droplet, I was able to see almost the universe, as it were. So it was unbelievable. But in the process, as I was working on each of the chakras, I was having problems with those places. I had everywhere from the Muladhara. I don't want to go into gory details about them. Till one day when I was working at home on a Sunday, suddenly I couldn't see through one eye. And there's nothing that I could do. Completely traumatized. The next morning when I went there, they found the clinic that usually I was an expatriate out there. We go there. It was found to be full of blood. They sent me to a specialized center, and they said the retina had torn, and then they had to do some work. They did that. It took about 3 months for me to recover. And during that process, I contacted a person who was my spiritual guru, and he said, no, there's something that you have not done correctly, and this is the way that you do it. I did it again, and this particular time that I had exactly the same experience, but the retina tore at the bottom. This time it was far more difficult, because if it tears at the bottom, you can't even do laser surgery. They had to do what is called a cryolaser surgery. I had to go to Singapore, and they had to apply liquid nitrogen and then put me through that. And the doctors asked me, they said, this is very uncommon. There are only 3 or 4 situations under which this can happen. You could have HIV. They tested me. I wasn't, fortunately, HIV patient or whatever. Extreme diabetes, I wasn't. And extreme myopia, which I wasn't. So they were trying to explore with me, what is it? So I said I was meditating. They laughed. Of course, they didn't believe a word of what I was saying. But that's exactly what happened. And I and if those of you who maybe understand this to some extent, so what I was doing was really the energization of the Ajna chakra, which is at this point, and which is what affected my eyes. And if for some reason, if it had been allowed to go further and I was able to go further, and I had gone through this up to that point, and I hadn't stopped, it would have probably affected my brain, perhaps. I don't know. And I have seen people, and there are written experiences. I don't want to frighten you, but there are written experiences of people who have tried these and have shared their experiences of how that can affect your brain. So to that extent, I really do not want to work with, I don't want to encourage anybody to venture into this space on their own and fool around, as it were, as I did. I was a fool, but I wouldn't want to wish it upon anybody else. So it requires, of course, after that, I was able to understand these principles better and went through processes which are much safer, and they're not even almost therapy. They are purely internally self-reflective processes. They're kind of a deep vipassana, which takes you far deeper into yourself with a certain understanding of what is happening at different energy centers. So in that sense, it's not even a therapy really. So that's one of the reasons why some of the things have to be really experiential. They have to be face to face. Bhanumati, I have been a yoga practitioner practicing yoga nidra at a beginner level for the last 1 year. How different the program will be, understand somatic psychology. No, you don't have to. That's why I said in any of these, you don't need to. They will all be on an experiential basis. Let's say there's a lot of stuff that is being touted around as somatics. At the end of the day, the somatic is about experiencing in the body the emotions that you feel. Many parts of your body are representatives of certain emotions. For instance, if I were to ask any of you if you're anxious, so take you into a mild trance state and ask you to experience, where does that anxiety rest in your body? Can you visualize it? Can you think about that and see, where is it affecting you? Believe you me, 90% of the time, it'll be in your stomach area, the navel area. And that is where it is, the Manipuraka chakra. If it is a deep fear, it'll be lower down in the Swadhisthana chakra. Very often when I ask people to talk about, when they talk, say, I'm tremendously stressed out. And when I ask them to look into themselves and tell me where the stress is about, they point out to their heart area. It is not stress, it is caused by relationship, because the heart area is caused by relationship. And in fact, there's a very, very good book, Brenda Burns, I think, I'm not quite sure, The Journey. There's a book called The Journey, where she talks about the somatic work, probably better than many others who have looked at it from a psychological angle. This person studied neurolinguistic programming with Tony Robbins, I think. People try to discount it, saying, oh, it's a raving of a mad woman or something. It is not. It's extremely powerful. The process that she outlines is workable. You can actually, by going through that book, at the end of it, she describes about how you can figure out what kind of emotions you're going through and how can you get rid of them. Unfortunately, what happens is, yes, you can superficially, but the deep emotions are still stored at a very cellular level. So the work that you need to do to take them out of the cellular level is that much deeper. It goes into deeper reflection. So the Yoga Nidra is one of those processes. There is the only school, as it were, in yoga, which I believe, in my limited knowledge, teaches Yoga Nidra properly, is the Bihar School of Yoga. They really go into the science of what Yoga Nidra is. There's an absolutely marvelous book. I think it was written by Swami Satyananda Saraswati. That's available. So the practical aspect of how to do Yoga Nidra is probably very different from many others who were trained by someone else, who in turn trained by somebody else who are teaching you yoga. I'm not quite sure. It's also something which over a period of time I perfected working with people who are masters in this particular space. So uh, I mean, just to answer the question about the Yoga Nidra. So I'm just outlining the fact that there is a lot of experiential learning that needs to happen. Brandon brings groups to this. What is that? Sorry, what is it, Ramcharan? You have put them here. I'm not able to.
Oh, you mentioned Brandon Hayes and her journey work. She actually met her at the place we're going to be holding the retreat. She herself brings groups there.
Okay.
Just an interesting coincidence.
Oh, is it Brandon Hayes? Is it? Yeah, she's the one who wrote the book, The Journey.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's an absolutely marvelous book. I mean,
it's brilliant work, and she's also deeply influenced by Ramana.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. We are almost. I didn't realize this is what time flies. Actually, we just have a few minutes left. If any of you have any specific questions, we'll continue these conversations. I'm not saying every one of you would need to attend this, but some of you may have a call that you would like to attend. And I just leave it with you. Yeah, get in touch with us. And if you have a dozen people to work with, we will run this program. And I'm sure it will happen. Here, there are many of you here. I see names which are not Indian. So possibly if you have, I'm quite happy to stay on for another 5-10 minutes if you have any questions. I know I'm taking a risk by going to some of these things which may not make sense to everybody. But I think it is important that at least I throw up these stuff so that you get interested and start looking into them and ask questions so that even if you're not going to the experiential learning part of it, you will have a cognitive understanding of what it's about. Any questions at this stage? Okay. So, Ramcharan, any last words before we wrap up?
Well, it just crossed my mind that, originally we talked about a sort of target audience being executives, and we've expanded that to include coaches. I'm just reflecting on how it's both a really valuable tool of self-knowledge, and that for the coaches who may be listening in on this call, I think that a bit of coaching experience and training, it's obvious that the deeper you're able to know your own process and know your own self, the more you can be of service in your coaching work. So I don't know how much we'll actually be exploring that in the retreat, but just the idea of self-knowledge leading to greater presence and greater resonance, ability to empathize, all these things. It's very, very relevant for people in helping professions.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that you brought about. I just would like to leave it with you this way. This is not going to cover the ICF competencies in that sense, but yes, it is about the awareness. It's also more about the European Mentoring Coaching Council's definition of competency of understanding self. It's about something that Carl Rogers says in his book on Becoming a Person, where he says, unless the coach is tremendously self-aware, it's impossible for the coach to make the other person aware. And Otto Scharmer covers it in Theory U in a slightly different way. What this experience would be about is going that far deep into your inner self that the level of awareness that you would get would probably more than anything that you have so far experienced. That's all I can say at this point in time. It's not superficial, it's very, very deep. But in any event, we have one more session in January. We would, the second Wednesday of January, we would have another session before we have the retreat. And any of you have questions about this, want to know more about it, please do write to me, and Ramcharan will try and answer as much as possible. I personally believe my explorations in this space have personally made me a much better coach, helped me understand myself far better. That's really what matters. Okay. So surely, what I would like to leave with is in these sessions, as long as it creates a greater inquiry within yourself, exploration within yourself, that's really something that what I would like to see as the desired outcome of these sessions. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that there wasn't enough space for you to ask questions, or probably it was too complex to ask questions, too confusing to ask questions. I'm not quite sure. But think about this. You can listen to the recording, and if something comes up, please reach out to us. Thank you very much indeed. Bye, Ramcharan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.